Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that, let's be honest, affects every single one of us. That powerful, invisible link between what's going on in our head and our body's ability to fight off getting sick. We're going to get into the real science behind why you always seem to catch a cold right when you're most stressed out. You know that feeling, right? When you're just stressed out, totally overwhelmed, maybe completely burned out. But have you ever stopped to think that feeling isn't, well, just a feeling? It's not all in your head. It's actually a physical signal, kind of like an alarm bell, telling you that your body's number one defense, your immune system, might be taking a serious hit. All right, so first things first, let's really get to know our opponent here. Stress. And I want to be clear, we're not just talking about the feeling of being overwhelmed. No, this is a powerful physiological force that can silently, sneakily sabotage our health from the inside out. So let's look at how science actually defines it. The key thing to get here is that stress isn't the tough situation itself. It's the gap you feel between what the situation demands and what you feel you have in the tank to handle it. You know? It's that gut feeling of, I just don't have what it takes for this right now. That is the biological trigger. Okay, so our bodies are actually pretty well equipped to handle short bursts of stress. It all happens in 3 stages. First up, you've got the alarm stage. That's that initial jolt, the fight or flight response. Then, if the stress sticks around, your body enters resistance, where it's basically working overtime, adapting and trying to cope. But, and this is the big but, if that stress just doesn't let up, you hit stage 3, exhaustion. And that, my friends, is the danger zone. It's where your resources are totally tapped out and the door is flung wide open for illness to walk right in. So what's actually happening under the hood when you're stressed? Well, it triggers something called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Yeah, let's just call it the HPA axis. Think of it like your body's emergency command center. When the alarm goes off, it floods your system with a hormone called cortisol. Now, in small doses, for short emergencies, cortisol is great. It's super helpful. But when you're chronically stressed and cortisol is always high, it does the exact opposite. It basically acts like a suppressor, telling your awesome immune cells to stand down. Not good. And if you're wondering just how big of a deal this is, well, the scale is pretty staggering. Let me give you a number. Data from the UK a few years back showed that stress was responsible for a whopping 40%. 40% of all work-related illnesses. So this isn't just some small personal thing we each deal with. It's a massive society-wide problem. Okay, so when we feel that stress building up and we're worried about getting sick, what do? A lot of us turn to the wellness industry for that quick fix, right? But do any of those popular remedies actually work? It's time to separate the myths from the real facts. And here it is, the million-dollar question. You see it everywhere, right? Plastered on juices, supplements, you name it. Boost your immune system. But is boosting even what we should be trying to do? Here's the thing. The goal isn't really boosting, it's all about balance. As immunologist Annette Grumach puts it, our immune system is designed for equilibrium, kind of like a finely tuned machine. If you overstimulate it, that can be just as bad as suppressing it. It can lead to things like autoimmune disorders and allergies. Think about it. You don't want a hyperactive, out-of-control army, right? You want a smart, disciplined, well-regulated one. All right, let's talk about the big one, the legend, vitamin C. Everyone, and I mean everyone, reaches for it the second they feel a sniffle coming on. But what's the real story? Does it actually do anything? Yeah, the science on this is crystal clear. It's a myth. Now, let me be specific. If you have an actual diagnosed vitamin C deficiency, then yes, supplements are absolutely crucial for you. But for the average healthy person, gulping down those giant vitamin C tablets isn't going to stop you from getting a cold. Your body is pretty smart, it just gets rid of the extra that it doesn't need. Okay, what about this one? I bet you've seen it all over social media. That spoonful of honey with propolis that's supposed to, turbine your immune system? Is there any truth to that? Nope, this one's a myth too. Look, honey and propolis do have some nice anti-inflammatory properties, which is cool, but is there any solid, robust scientific evidence that they can actually supercharge or strengthen your immune system in a real, measurable way? The answer is no. So, if all those quick fixes and magic potions don't really work, what does? What can we actually do? Let's shift gears now and talk about the proven, science-backed strategies that genuinely support your body's defenses. The real answer you're going to find isn't about some magic pill. It's about the boring but brilliant foundational habits. We're talking about getting enough sleep, which, by the way, helps regulate that stress hormone cortisol we mentioned earlier. We're talking about a varied diet full of real food, which literally fuels the trillions of tiny microbes in your gut that are a massive part of your immune system. These pillars, good food, moderate exercise, getting enough sleep, staying hydrated, and keeping your vaccines up to date, that's the stuff that truly builds a strong, well-functioning immune system. In fact, let's zoom in on one of those for a second, your gut. This is so important. A huge part of your immune system actually lives right there, in that community of microbes we call the microbiota. And the absolute best way to keep this internal army of yours happy and strong, you've got to feed it right. That means tons of fiber from things like fruits, veggies, and whole grains, and reinforcing the troops with probiotics you find in stuff like yogurt and other fermented foods. So, when we say we're supporting our defenses, who are we even talking about? What does the system look like? Well, your immune system basically has two main branches. A good way to think about it is like two different armies, both working together to protect you. First up, you've got your innate immunity. This is your frontline infantry, your first line of defense. They are fast, they're generalists, meaning they're nonspecific, and you're born with them. They just attack anything that looks foreign. But then you have your adaptive immunity. This is like your elite special forces unit. They're a bit slower to get going, but they are incredibly specific. They learn to recognize one particular enemy, they develop custom-made weapons, we call them antibodies, to take it down, and, this is the really cool part, they remember that enemy for life. Okay, so we've talked about how to build up our defenses. But now, I want to talk about the stakes. What happens in the absolute most extreme cases, when those defenses just completely collapse? When an immune system gets severely weakened, the body becomes vulnerable to something called opportunistic infections. And these are caused by just everyday germs, viruses, bacteria that a healthy person would fight off without even knowing they were there. But in a body with no defenses, these common little bugs can become absolutely devastating, even deadly. The most well-known example of this, of course, is in the advanced stages of HIV, which is what leads to AIDS. And the consequences are just devastating. A 2022 study looked at a group of severely immunocompromised HIV/AIDS patients in an ICU in Brazil. It found that the mortality rate from these opportunistic infections was a shocking 85.3%. Think about that. Over 85%. That is what happens when the body's guards are completely gone. Now look, this is obviously an extreme example, but it perfectly illustrates the fundamental principle here. For most of us, chronic stress isn't going to cause that level of collapse. But what it does do is push your body in that same direction. It slowly, day by day, chips away at your defenses, leaving you more and more vulnerable. This is why protecting your immune health isn't some luxury, it's an absolute necessity. So at the end of the day, think of your immune system like a fortress, and every single choice you make, what you eat, how you sleep, how you manage stress, it either reinforces the walls of that fortress or it leaves a crack in the wall for invaders to sneak through. So I'll leave you with this question. Are you actively building your fortress, or are you just leaving the gates wide open?